Well, all right. Welcome back for our second period. Our guest interview of the day is Greg Prato. And if you haven't heard of Greg Prato, you're going to hear about him a lot today and soon out there because he's got a ton of books out there that you would totally be interested in, rock and roll music. But there's two in particular that made us want to bring him on our show, and that's called Dynasty, which was written, in 2012?
I believe 2012. This is what the cover looks like.
There you go. Yep. And the other one is called Hapless, which is about the 72 Islanders in that first season. Both fantastic books, very, very interesting. If you need a history lesson, read those two books. You wouldn't really need anything else. And pretty much both of those books are interviews with players that we all know and love. So, Greg Prato, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking time off and spending some time with us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Let's first go with who is Greg Prato? He's a Long Island guy. Were you born here? Where'd you grow up and all that?
I was going to say, are you guys familiar with the hit 1979 film called The Jerk, starring Steve Martin?
Absolutely.
Yes. There's the famous part where the character Navin R. Johnson is asked who he is, and he goes, Navin R. Johnson is a very complex individual. But Greg Prato is not a very complex individual. He's a longtime Islander, Mets, and Jets fan, which was a very painful trio of teams to root for. Because I'm a longtime Long Island resident. Started following sports in the early 70s, and those three teams at the time were all Long Island based. Of course, the Jets fled in 1984. And the Islanders, I still stand by. The Islanders, unlike the Mets and Jets, have given me the most pleasure as a young person, even though I was too young to really fully grasp and I think enjoy the Stanley Cup years. I came in kind of in the middle of it. Although I did witness the first, I just happened to see the first Bob Nystrom Cup-winning goal because my father was next door watching the game. I went with him to our next door neighbor's house. I just happened to witness that. The next game I witnessed, fast forward, was the 1982 playoffs where the Islanders came back against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And from that point on, I was a diehard fan of the Islanders. I watched all the games, stayed in contact. I kept watching them throughout the years. I've had my heart broken many, many times over the years by them. But out of the Mets, Jets, and Islanders, I think the Islanders are the best run. I think they probably have the most passionate fan base, I think. So, yeah, I'm out of those three teams, I still, I'm not a big tattoo guy, but if I was ever to get a tattoo, the Islanders logo may be in the running. That's all I'm going to say.
So where did you grow up, Greg? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah, I grew up for elementary school, I grew up in Merrick, New York. And then I moved to Greenlaw, New York, and that's where I went to middle school and high school. And I went to college in Stony Brook, so I've always been Long Island based.
That's great. Well, Ray and I grew up in Uniondale, literally a block south of the Coliseum.
Okay, yeah.
We were there for the early days. I'm a little older than Ray, so we were there when they were building it. Wow. Laying in the rubble while they were building it in the foundation with our friends. When we go back to the beginning. So when we read your books, it really brought back a lot of memories. And what we really wanted to get to was the format you used, right? You didn't just write a book. You went right to the sources, and you pretty much used primary source quotations throughout the whole thing. How did you wind up coming up with this idea, especially if you hadn't written about this type of thing, with regard to your other books?
Right. Yeah. People refer to it as the oral history approach, and what it is I use this approach for the first Islanders book I did, which is called Dynasty, which it basically, we start from the Islanders' first season, which was 72-73. We go through the 1984 season. And each chapter, for instance, the 1980 Stanley Cup, it'll be, it starts with just the topic, me giving a brief intro of the chapter, and then it's just all quotes from people that I did exclusive interviews for the book. So you'll have Bob Nystrom talking about his memories of the 1980 Stanley Cup, Al Arbor talking about it, Bill Torrey, Brian Trottier, Clark Gillies, the list goes on and on. So you're getting you're getting the story straight from the horse's mouth. with that. For the second book, Hapless Islanders, that's more of like a narrative where I kind of told the story. It's not just quotes. That is kind of like a traditional book setup. But that book, I did a lot of exclusive interviews for that too. So it's not just quotes that have been reused.
Yeah, I really noticed that in that the difference. It's a subtle difference though, because you do have a style, and then just I don't know if Steve told you, but we're also big Richie Blackmore fans, so we read the Rainbow book as well, and which is very similar in style, where you had a lot of interviews going on and that oral history, and talking to Steve, and definitely found it really interesting. A subtle difference, but for the most part, yeah, that just really relying on the right people to interview, getting the type of information you wanted out of them and getting it out there. We really I found it very different. I'm not the most, well-read guy out there, but I mean, I would just say I found it to be a unique style, and very, particularly for something that's, non-fictional, felt that it was really an effective way to get an insight to what you're really trying to put forth. And my only other question would be is, I know you've written other books. Are they all in a similar type of style, or do you kind of go between different styles where you do more storytelling on your own?
Yeah, they kind of alternate between the two. I've done quite a few in the oral history format, and then I've done a few that also have like a narrative type style. But the way that I like to kind of explain the book Dynasty and also the oral history format is it's basically a documentary, but in book form is kind of how I like to describe it. Because you're getting the story straight from the horse's mouth. It's not like me explaining what was going through Bob Nystrom's mind when he scored that 1980 Cup winning goal.
What prompted you to just start writing about the Islanders? I mean, well, were you already planning to be an author all along? I mean, is that always something you wanted to do? And then
No,
what prompted you later on to be an Islander author?
Yeah, no, I became a writer totally by accident. I mean, I probably should have known that I could have been a writer because I was always very good at spelling and also English in school. And I was also pretty good with also history. So those together, that's pretty much, doing books about rock bands and sports. You got to, kind of know the history of these things and also be, I guess, a pretty good writer. But I just kind of happened on it totally by accident, and I started in the late 90s writing for music sites, just doing album reviews and interviews. And then by about 2008 or 2009, I made the jump to books. And the first sports book I ever did was a book called Sack Exchange, which was about the 80s New York Jets. And shortly after I finished that, I just always wanted to read a book about the Islanders. Like there have been a few books about the Islanders over the years. There was one in the early 80s, came out in 83, 84, I think called Countdown to a Dynasty or something like that. I forget the exact name.
Was that a large paperback of some kind? Like almost like a magazine?
I have it. It's like I see it straight ahead on my bookshelf, but I can't reach it. But yeah, it came out in late 83 because remember I got it around Christmas time of 1983. But see, like that book only went up to 1983. It didn't include the 1984 attempt at the whole Drive for Five and stuff like that, and also what happened, afterwards. So I just always wanted to read a book about that. And to the best of my knowledge, there was never an Islanders book set up in the oral history format, which is just quotes from the people that were there. So I, just started to reach out to some of the former players, and it took a while to get a few guys on board. But yeah, I'm very happy with how it came out. Out of all my sports books, that one may be the best selling and also steadiest selling one. It especially sells well around the holidays because my theory is I think people probably buy the paperback or hardcover and give it as a gift with probably Islanders tickets inside of it. That's just my theory. But yeah, that one. And the thing too, why I wanted to do these two books about the Islanders to me just never get the credit that they deserve. I think if the Islanders were in the midst of a dynasty now, they would be hailed as like one of the all-time great teams, but they're kind of like the forgotten dynasty. In fact, I really hope one day ESPN's 50 for 50 or whatever it's called wises up and does a whole thing about the Dynasty Islanders, because you're doing everyone. You'd think that one of the great teams of all time, they would probably want to do a special on. They only did one. The only special I've ever seen recently is the idiotic John Spano era, which, You know, you would think they want to do something more about
Me and Steve are actually in that, as a matter of
Oh,
fact,
okay.
if you're watching.
Yeah. So I
Well,
mean,
We'll
that's
get into
why
that
we're
another
Tom
time.
Cook.
yeah. Yeah. So
But,
I mean, one day, hopefully they, you know, wise up and do, you know, because again, it always gets my goat when people talk about the greatest coaches of all time. And of course, to talk about guys like Lombardi, who of course is a legend, Belichick. But I always say Al Arbor should definitely be mentioned in the same breath. It's such a outrage that the Islanders never get the credit or coverage of even like the Rangers. The Rangers get all the credit. Meanwhile, the Islanders, I think, are the far superior franchise. They've done so much more in their shorter amount of time. It's just, don't get me started.
I think you
Oh,
covered pretty
right
well.
there.
I think you covered pretty well in both books the reasons behind that, obviously. But I think one of the things that really hit me, just to get into, as you're touching on the Islanders as a dynasty, as a franchise, I mean, I think you did a really good job between both books, and I think they kind of overlap a little bit too. I think there's some stuff in the Hapless book that actually show up in the Dynasty book,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Yeah.
But I always had seen them because, okay, so I'm 58 years old, so I remember my first games really following the Islanders in that 74-75 season when he went to Philadelphia. Although, you know, I went to the first season and the second season, but I always look at that team, especially the dynasty era, as in phases. You had those first two seasons where they were hapless, right? Your book does a really good job of looking at the things that were going on in the background, who they had drafted, who was coming up, and Bill Torrey actually saying at one point that you put in there, and like, can't wait to get these guys out of here so these guys finally can pull in. But they had that first phase where there was really nobody there. You had Eddie Westfall and a couple of guys, and Potvin comes in and whatever. And then you have that 74-75 season until that 78-79 season. And that's another phase where you have the whole new guys coming in, becoming a little bit more mature, like Potvin, like Gillies, like Howitt, like Nystrom, and then having guys like Jude Drouin and J.P. Parisi and Dave Fortier and guys like that coming in and kind of filling the gap for a while until they were really ready to go. And I don't think anybody ever really covered it that way either. Right now, let alone just the Islanders themselves, how great they were during their dynasty years. But I really thought that was especially for a guy like you, you're younger than me, so I don't know if you remember those 70s teams like Steve and I do.
I didn't.
But,
I mean, I've like done a lot of like research and stuff, but no, the first Islander game I ever saw was the Nystrom winning Game 6 of 1980 Stanley Cup was the first one I ever saw.
But it's so
We'll
important.
get into what Ray was saying along those lines. And another thing your book outlines great, but it's without even really saying it, you can just follow along and see the history, is that turnaround after the first 2 years. You know, they get Arbor for that second year, and then he makes the team better, cuts down on the goals, and goals are going up. We got a couple extra guys that came in like Potvin. When they made that turnaround, it was a huge turnaround. Number one, it was quick after 2 years, but when you think about it, if not for the upset against Toronto in 77-78 in the quarterfinals in the seventh game in overtime, if they pulled that off, every one of their playoff appearances would have wound up in the semis before they won the cup in 1980. So you would have went from 74-75 to 1980. Only 1 year they didn't make it to the semifinals. Then they finally won it, and then again, then they're in the finals for 5 years in a row. That's an incredible run for 10 years or so.
And how many times do they lose to the Montreal Canadiens? In the playoffs during that span? 3 times, exactly. I think.
It's true.
Twice or 3 times in that span. You know, the current dynasty until they're ready to take over, and then you see it actually happen again with Edmonton. But yeah, Steve's right, and exactly what I'm saying is that period before the dynasty with those 70s teams was really huge in the maturation of the team and how they became the Dynasty, and you cover it so well. And I was so happy to see it because you don't ever see anybody mentioning it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Most of these books I've done, whether it be The Islanders or Rainbow or any of the books I do, most of the times, well, pretty much every single book I've ever done is a topic that, as a fan or an admirer of the subject, I wanted to read a book like that, but there was no book about it. So that's why I set out to do the Dynasty book and also
That's
the
awesome.
Hapless
That's
Islander.
great.
Yeah, although I do have to admit the person that gave me really the push to do the Hapless Islanders book, the second book, was none other than Stan Fischler, because he got in contact with me last summer, which would have been the summer of 2024. He happened to just come upon a copy of Dynasty. I could have sworn, because I interviewed him for the Dynasty book, and I could have sworn I sent him a copy or I got in contact asking him to send him a copy, but either he lost it over time or never got it. And he just happened to get a copy from a friend, and he emailed me out of the blue just saying, hey, I read this book. I'm blown away. I think it's like the best Islanders book I've ever read. And to hear that from him, I was blown away.
Wow.
And then I said, Stan, an idea I've always had, but I've never really pursued, is this idea about just the first year of the Islanders by itself. Like, do you think that's a good idea? And if I do that, would you be interested in being interviewed? And he said, absolutely, you got to do it. So right after that, I interviewed him and a bunch of other people, and that's how the second Islanders book, Hapless Islanders, came about.
And when I heard about that book,
mm-hmm.
I went to Ray. I said, there's a guy who actually writes about that first season. I said, we have to get this book, and then we have to get this guy on to talk about it, because again, nobody ever really spent that much time, other than the obvious stuff, the stuff that they glaze over, which everybody knows about. But you went really in depth, and getting into that, your approach to that particular book, I know you, as a fan, you wanted to get more into, okay, look, we know they sucked, and we know, Bill Torrey walked around the building 20 times and didn't take the, didn't take the bait from Steve Pollock and all that stuff. But what was going through your head as you went forward with this, when you finally, you finally put your pedal to the metal and you went and did this book? What was going through your head with your approach and how you wanted to make it come out the way you wanted it to be?
Well, the thing is also with these books, including Hapless Islanders, I try to put in little tidbits that you're not going to get in like a run-of-the-mill sports book. So if I remember correctly, at the beginning, I kind of try to paint the picture of what was going on in the world, or the United States, or I was going to say United States, but also Canada. So that would have been like North America. What was going on in North America around the early 70s, with TV shows or music and movies and fashion, just so you kind of get transported back to that and you're in like the right state of mind. I also interviewed some other people that like talk about what it was like to go see shows at Nassau Coliseum, like rock shows, comparing rock shows and also like, Islander games at the time, so like just tidbits like that. I don't think you get in most like sports books kind of. So that's, I always try to put stuff like that in the book as well. And I mean, that's trying to think anything else that sticks out with what, that's really it. And then of course, just talking about, I try to ask just the same questions when I speak to people as well. I try to, and there's things that people talk about that aren't even part of the set of questions that I have. So if they bring up something that I find interesting, then the interview may veer off into a totally different section. And then maybe that thing that they bring up may be a topic then I realize, oh, wait, I didn't even think of that. So then I'll ask future interviews maybe about that topic too. So, that's kind of just things that kind of popped in my mind right now.
Who did you find? I mean, you ran the gamut, man. I mean, really, I couldn't find. I mean, you even had my man Gordy Lane interview, who
Right.
I loved growing up,
Right.
and you very rarely hear about it. And what was really cool at the end of Dynasty, you ask about who was some of the most underrated Islanders that don't get the notoriety. Gordy pops in there along with a few other people like Dave Langevin and stuff.
Yeah.
But I did notice that there were like the tone with the interviews with most of the guys that you interviewed were pretty placating. They wanted to, have a nice positive view of a lot of things. There was some, there was some cool inside baseball that was going on. They talked about too. But there was a couple of guys that I noticed that were a little bit more willing to go kind of push the envelope, not so much on negative stuff, but just on maybe not so flowery type of experiences. And I'm just curious if you kind of came away with the same feeling, and if maybe you felt if there was anybody who was a little more interesting than the others that you interviewed for both those books.
Yeah, for Dynasty, Billy Harris was very, very honest about what he thought, especially about Billy Smith. And
Yeah.
that
Oof.
was pretty, yeah. I really tried to get Billy Harris for the second Islanders book I did, but I just couldn't locate him. I don't know where he is now. Last I heard, when I interviewed him for the Dynasty book, he was based in Toronto. He was making soy candles at the time. Yeah. And I even got back in contact with that company when I was doing this Hapless Islanders book, and they're like, yeah, no, he's not here anymore. We don't know where he is. So I tried to get him again because, yeah, he was a great, great interview for the first book.
He was
very honest. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that I'm happy, like recently, to talk about the current Islanders. I'm happy that Pat LaFontaine is finally being honored, but there's so many other players that the Islanders really need to give credit and have like a night and add them to the banner. I think Billy Harris definitely deserves to be there since he was the first #1 pick and he was a great player throughout the 70s. Chico Resch should have been on there years and years ago. I don't know why he's not on that. I just hope the Islanders wise up and do this before it's too late and these guys pass away.
Are you saying they should retire their number, or they should be in the Islanders Hall of Fame?
No, they should be in the Islanders Hall of Fame. I'm not saying retire the number. I mean, like, of course, I thought Kenny Janssen was a good player, but I think Chico Resch was a much more vital.
Yeah, surprised Chico's not in there. Yeah, Harris too.
And
yeah, and Steve and I were just talking recently about LaFontaine being in there, and I said it's long overdue.
Right.
But now that he's in there, I think Pierre Turgeon is another guy that they really need to honor, whether they retire his number or they put him in the Hall of Fame as well.
I agree.
And then that whole 93 team, that 92-93 team that spanked the Penguins is a whole other thing, dude. Like, I don't know if you're thinking about it, but I mean, that's a whole other book. And what happened after that and how they were dismantled and what happened to the franchise and how the ownership was involved in the dismantling of things and how they went downhill from there is like a whole other story. And that's another thing that Steve and I could probably talk about forever because we were involved in a lot of the fan activism at that time. But those are all, I totally agree with you because I was just talking to Steve and I was like, yeah, they should retire Turgeon. And Steve comes back to me with, and they should add all of these guys too, like 15
what you have in your Dynasty book, again, and we have a surprise guest coming up, maybe 2 shows from now. I don't want to spoil a surprise, but again, it's from those development years. There's plenty of guys in there that should be in that Hall of Fame with a plaque. Your Jerry Harts, Gary Howitts, guys like that. And there's even more than that. Chico Resch, like you said.
Yeah.
What they should do is, look, I love the arena, and I think if they came up short somewhere, the history that the Islanders have is to have a wall with plaques on it as their Hall of Fame. It should be a room where there should be some memorabilia there, and there should be halls for different eras.
I went to one game at UBS Arena 2 or 3 years ago, and the most disappointing thing was there is no Islanders museum. When I go to Citi Field, they have a beautiful Mets museum with uniforms and baseballs and bats and like video montages and stuff. There's no reason why the Islanders, I mean, that should really be I can't believe they overlooked that when they put together UBS Arena. That should have been the first thing that they ever had is a nice Islanders Hall of Fame that you walk through with, again, jerseys and pucks and sticks and TV screens with, footage of Nystrom's goal and everything like that.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And what's weird is that in the Coliseum, I don't know if it was because they had limited space, but they had the Islanders Hall of Fame. They had those plaques. Those plaques, for the most part, came from the Coliseum, but they were all like by the locker room where nobody could see them.
I remember.
Right? So then they bring it out and they just put it on a wall. But you're right. I think I think there's some space over there, Steve, and I know you've got some ideas, but there's definitely some space where they could do something like that. The Mets do it, the Giants do it at their stadiums. It's long overdue, and maybe that's something that maybe we should be working on as fans to let the ownership know should happen.
Well, if anything, at least these guys that own the club now at least seem to have open ears. I mean, over the years over there, it's just been nothing but a hey,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
pay for the tickets and shut up.
Yeah. Right. I agree.
Especially,
Yeah.
especially during some bad times.
Yeah, no, I am happy with the Islanders' current ownership. I mean, at least they're trying, especially when I compare what's going on with the Mets and Jets. The Islanders, at least the ownership, they have a clue what works, what doesn't work. At least they're trying and everything. They're definitely moving in the right direction with Schaefer and everything. So I'm actually content with the Islanders. At least they're going in the right direction. You can't say the same for the Jets, and now I wonder even about the Mets either.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, like at the same time, what we saw, when we first started our podcast last year around February, it was leading up to the trade deadline. The team was just a mess. There was all this tension between fans and wondering when the ownership is going to start looking for a new GM and that whole thing, and then the Lamoriello stuff. So we decided to do this, and we had some good interviews with some people. And then it was, okay, do they keep Lou or do they get rid of him? Okay, now who out of all these guys, who are they going to take? I mean, this whole progress leading up to the draft, and then the camp in the summer, and then now right about at the start of the season, we are like unbelievably happy with the way things are moving.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen overnight, but I think as pissed off as we were when we decided to get this thing going, we're on a real even keel right now. Looking forward to seeing the season start, because everything looks like, from the operations to the on ice product to now the minor league team, and what we have also even still developing in juniors. There seems to be a plan. There seems to be a guy who knows how to steer the ship, and there appears to be this new breath of fresh air with the way they are interacting with the fans, and the fan base seems to be very, very happy about that.
I agree. I definitely agree. We'll see also around the trade deadline. Hopefully they're wise with dealing off some of the older players and getting draft picks for the next draft. That I think is the most important thing. I guess it all depends how they're doing also at the trade deadline as well. So,
Right.
Yeah, no, I think for years that the Islanders were always a step behind, starting from the end of the dynasty era, from a business standpoint, because right after the Islanders went to that fifth cup, things changed dramatically for the NHL. There's a lot more money that was infused. Gretzky was on, his ascent, and it brought in a whole different mindset on how these guys had to own and manage and run their teams from a business perspective. And I think you saw a lot of teams, go in that direction. They brought in Gary Bettman a few years later, and the Islanders always seem to be hanging back in that small market, old style NHL ownership mindset. And even though, once Pickett got rid of the team and you had Charles Wang in there, it always seemed like they were holding back as the rest of the league kind of went into a different direction business wise. And I think they finally, with this ownership group, started catching up. And then finally with the management group that they got in there, I think they've caught up, at least from a perspective of being contemporary with what's going on with the rest of the league, especially the teams that are very successful in the rest of the league. So let's hope that stays the course with that.
I agree. Yep. Let's see.
Well, as far as those two books, Dynasty and Hapless, I think, like you were saying before, if ESPN ever wanted to do a 30 for 30 on the Islanders, which they are definitely well overdue as far as trying to take care of right now, they only would have to go to your two books. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. Really, you cover the history of the Islanders, and again,
like nobody else.
You did a job of actually covering the history of this team, and you did it mainly through words of the people who were there.
Yeah.
You know, you had a little inside scoops. You had just regular history. You had some of the stuff that maybe some people already knew, but you heard it from the horse's mouth, like you say. I don't think they would have to go any further than your two books to figure this out. And I say that to everybody else out there. Pick them up. I mean, Christmas is coming. Hanukkah is coming. Get your gifts going and get this guy's two books. Put them up there. I mean, I couldn't put them down, either one. And I'm not a big bookworm either, but I grabbed those two books, and within a week, I had them both read, which is crazy for me. But what else do you have on the fire right now, Greg?
Well, what's funny is at the end of this month, October, I have this book, which is a music book. It's called Alternative for the Masses, the 90s Alt-Rock Revolution in Oral History. And that's about a lot of the 90s alternative bands like Nine Inch Nails, Smashing Pumpkins, Faith No More, Primus, Soundgarden, Nirvana, those types of bands. So I have that coming out. And I got to say, the idea that you said about the 1993 Islanders is not that bad of an idea for a possible future book.
I'm telling you right now,
that's only the start of it, though. So that's the thing, right? Like,
you can get into that nice history of that team and how fantastic it was, and pretty much Bill Torrey's last hurrah with that deal he made. You know, those two deals he made in order to straighten out the LaFontaine situation, which was a horrible thing. And when Brent Sutter looked at what was going on and said, "Look, I can't stick around here either," and he made wonderful things happen with two bad situations. Turned that club around, and then it was just dismantled when the Don Maloney era came in, and the four, what do they call them? The Gang of Four, who were kind of making believe they were the owners, but they really only owned 10% between the four of them, and all that. That's a whole, but it's a rabbit hole worth going down.
Yeah.
You know, put your armor on, put your soft body armor on, and and get in there. But it's definitely worth it. So if you're thinking about it, that would be a book that no one's ever written.
Yeah. Definitely for more contemporary Islander fans as well, right? Younger fans that really might not even remember the dynasty years, having some explanation of why the team had gone through such a long period of dysfunction. I think it's really worth digging up, and I'm sure it's something that you have gone through, right, in your time. But yeah, man, it's definitely and if you ever need any little inside info, we're here to help you out too as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say, if I ever do another Islanders book, I'll definitely reach out to both of you guys about doing a possible interview for it.
Awesome.
That would be great. That would be great. And listen, the other thing that we thought was great when we were reading your books was our old friend Gary Delabate was all over your book in the Dynasty book. I was like cracking up, man. I mean, we're good friends. We go back a long way, and I'm sitting there, I'm texting Ray. I'm saying, "You see, Gary's all over this book." He goes, "Yeah, I was just going to text you." But Big Island, huge.
It's funny, right? Because when we first started this, Steve was like, we should bring Gary on. And I'm like, what the hell are we going to bring him on for? What about the Islanders? Steve graduated high school with him. He's a Uniondale guy. He's a good guy. I'm sure he's a big Islander fan.
He's a huge Islander fan.
He's a huge Islander fan. But then we read your book, and I'm like, we got to have him on now. Yeah. I mean, now we didn't even know he did the whole thing with the Sports Channel that 1 or 2 years that he did that. So that's great.
He'll be on. I already ran it by him. It's just a matter of when. That's all.
Oh, good, very good. Yeah, I was going to say Gary's always been an incredible help over the years with doing interviews, and even like if I have a question about maybe like contacts for certain people that I'm trying to get in he's always a super nice guy, always goes out of his way. He's total salt of the earth, I would say, Gary is.
No, well, without a doubt, as successful as he is, he's very down to earth, down to earth. I mean, every time we would have a high school reunion or something, he'd come there and it'd just be the same old regular guy. No, he's a great dude.
I agree.
So I guess that wraps it up for today. Greg, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. We'd love to have you back.
Yes.
One of these days. So we hope we can stay in touch. And Ray, you got anything else to say?
No, just really appreciate it, Greg. It was a great conversation. Really enjoyed the books. Like I said, I don't think anybody else out there covers the Islanders from a different phase perspective the way you have. There's been a lot of there's been a lot of things talked about it as far as the dynasty years, but really getting into those early years, especially guys like me and Steve who grew up and lived and died with them in the 70s, particularly, it was really excellent. And hopefully you get into a little bit more, moving on after the last book. It would be really interesting to see that too. But really appreciate you taking the time, man. It was great meeting you.
No problem. And also just want to quickly mention these two Islanders books. They're available as paperback, hardcover, Kindle, and both are even available as audio versions with me narrating, if you could believe that.
Okay, all right. That's great. Oh, one last thing regarding your books. Was there anything after regarding both books that shocked you or surprised you or just gave you some kind of a special feeling that you came across during that time when you were doing all these interviews?
No, I mean, I pretty much knew what I was getting into. There were definitely, like I said before, some topics would come up during an interview that I wasn't expecting. Like, I can't think of anything like offhand right now. If I look back at the books, I'd be able to give you some certain specific examples. But I kind of, I'm pretty well versed in the Islanders' history. I've been studying it since I was like a young kid. So especially that the 70s and 80s are really my, special, like, because, that's the early 80s is when I finally became a huge Islander fan and everything. And of course, stuck with them through the thick and thin. Although I have to admit, like in the mid to late 90s, I didn't watch as many games because it was because they were so unwatchable,
Mm-hmm.
Kind of similar to how like the Jets are right now. It's at the point I'm just going to give up watching them because it's just like torture,
Yeah, I'm the same way with them, man. It's like you watch the first two games of the season, and then if you're going to be watching any more games the rest of the season, and then it's just red zone, and then they're looking good today. Maybe I'll check out the game.
Yeah,
it's just so
right, exactly.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right. So again, Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show, and wish you all the best moving forward from here. And if you got a couple of minutes, once we get done recording, we'd love to check with you a couple more minutes. And I hope you don't have to run anywhere right away.
Sure.
You got time for a couple minutes? All right, great. Thank you very much, Greg Prato, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.